Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is tier list time. We are going to be ranking every single skill in Hypixel Skyblock. My rankings are going to be objectively correct, and they are going to be based on three things here, ladies and gentlemen. The first, how much content is there to do related to that specific skill in Skyblock? The second point, how much of that content is actually fun? If a skill has a lot of content, but it's boring, I am not going to rate it very highly. Number three, what is the potential for that skill in Skyblock? If a skill can be added onto, expanded upon a lot, I think that's a point in its favor. If a skill doesn't really have anything to do with the game at all, is pretty much entirely disconnected, that will be a negative. Before we begin, I just want to say please make sure to like and subscribe down below as it really helps out the channel a lot, and use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order. Without any further ado though, let's get started. Alrighty, first up is combat, and we're going to start off with a very non-controversial one. I'm going to put that in S+, quite easily. I think it is the strongest skill in the game as a whole. The amount of content that you can do related to combat is pretty much limitless. There's Slayer content, there's hunting for mobs in terms of bestiary, there's dungeoneering, there's different areas to go to, there's tons of different mobs in this game, a lot of ways to make a ton of money if you wanted to, there's boss content in the form of Kudra, even if I don't think Kudra is very good. Regardless, there is a lot to do with combat. Much of that content is very interesting already, and on top of that, the actual combat skill is pretty much limitless. They can continue to add new areas, new locations, new things to do, places to fight, etc., new weaponry. There's a lot to do already within the combat skill. I think it is the strongest skill currently within Hypixel Skyblock, and I don't even think it's that close, although maybe a couple of the other skills come relatively close. I don't think anyone is going to be surprised by this rating. I think this is the most clear frontrunner. However, my points going forward may actually disappoint you a little. Let's move on to number 2. The second skill here is mining. Another pretty uncontroversial one. I'm going to put this one in S flatly. I don't think it has the same level of depth as a whole as combat does. However, it is very much saved by the fact that there is a lot to do in mining already. Places to go in terms of the Crystal Hollows, the Dwarven Mines, as well as the Glaciite Tunnels. We're getting more expansions for mining in the near future in terms of the Great Glaciite Lake. That will be able to expand upon the concepts more. There's mine shafts, there's Heart of the Mountain. Basically a ton of different things to do within the skill, and many of those activities, in my view, are pretty fun. I don't think they rise to the level of enjoyability that combat tends to, but just because there's so much variety in what you're doing, the different drills you can get, how you upgrade your armor, when you get gemstones, how you can apply those to gear, there's a lot related to mining in its current form, and I think a lot of the skill as a whole is very enjoyable. I also think it's one of those skills that's relatively limitless. You can just continue to add more and more to mining as a whole, more areas to go, stronger enemies to fight within the mine shafts, for example, or more types of gemstones or more types of ores, especially as we get 1.21 content in the game. I really think mining will benefit quite a bit, potentially even becoming another S+ skill. Now, let's move on to farming. Farming is going to be the first one that I have a lot to complain about. I'm going to give it a C tier at best, and frankly, I could even give it lower. I'm being a little bit generous with its rating. I think farming is extremely weak currently. While there is quite a bit to do with the garden as a whole, the only interesting part of farming to me is pest farming a little bit, and even that's not super active, and the contests, which I actually think are pretty good. The concept of sitting there and farming for hundreds of hours to max out my crop milestones, I just don't want to do it. I have no interest in doing it. There's a reason why players turn on a movie or a show or something else in the background. It's because the skill itself kind of sucks. There's not really much going on there. I don't think it's very good in its current state at all. And I think it's also one of those skills that isn't easily expanded upon. I think they could do more with maybe a more direct way of farming, or maybe they expand on husbandry, but I think husbandry would be better served as a separate skill entirely, where you're raising animals, you could throw pelt hunting into that. I don't think farming as a whole is interesting in the slightest, doesn't have a crazy amount of potential other than adding a few more crops, but if the gameplay doesn't change, I don't really see it as something that's interesting. Obviously, you make quite a bit of money farming, but you can make more money mining, especially for Iron Man players. You're going to be sitting there in the diamond mines forever. I just don't really have that much of a positive view of farming as a whole. Foraging is a skill that I didn't think I would ever put in the A tier, but now it's going in the A tier. I think foraging already has stood out to me as a much improved version of something like, I don't know, farming as a whole. A skill that has been taken from basically no content to quite a bit to do. Obviously, right now, it's not done yet. I'm basing a lot of this also on the potential. I think there's nearly limitless potential, same way as mining. Obviously, it's not to the same level of mining yet. There's not as much to do, but what we've seen so far is pretty fun. The gameplay, the progression is actually very active. I really enjoy the fact that the Heart of the Forest is directly leveled through contests that happen every single day. There's also the fact that whenever you cut down a tree, you get some amount of XP. I think something like that could make mining's early game a little bit better, but regardless, I think foraging is in a pretty excellent spot as a whole. If you're looking for a skill to get into and you haven't played the game in a long while, I think foraging is actually a great place to start. They've done a great job on the first island of Galatea. Obviously not the biggest island in the world. There's definitely more that needs to be done for this skill in order to enter into those top 2 tiers. But I think by the end of Island 3, if they continue to advance the formula a little bit, throw in some things that are interesting about foraging, maybe some different types of trees, different ways to chop them down, new items, etc., I think it could easily end up in the S tier, but for now, I'm going to place it in A. Fishing is a skill that I think has kind of fallen under the radar recently. I'm going to put it in low A tier. Now, some of you may disagree with me and say, Derailious, this is the worst skill in the game. It's awful. I don't like it. I actually think it's very good, and I think it has a ton of potential as a whole. I think they're also going to be expanding upon it a lot in the near future. I think that potential is why I put it so highly. First of all, before Bayou, I probably would have given it a B, maybe a high C, and I'm saying that as someone who maxed it before Bayou. I didn't think the concepts were that interesting, and the gameplay always felt a little convoluted in terms of how you upgraded your fishing rod and all of the different fishing rods you had. I think that the hooks, lines, and sinkers are better overall as a system. We're getting 2 more fishing-related islands. I think another thing that pushes this up is the concept of a fishing-based Slayer in the form of Guardian Slayer. Obviously, we haven't seen anything about Guardian Slayer yet. We know nothing about it, but just the prospect of them expanding upon different skills with Slayers included really makes me excited. That'll mean more sea creatures, more things to go for. Players really do like their Slayers. I think that fishing benefits a lot from that. Without something like Guardian Slayer, I may have placed it in B, but for now, I'm giving it an A. A low A, but an A nonetheless. Enchanting is not good. I'm putting it in D tier. I think that it is basically just a minigame, and that's it. There's not a lot of content there. There's not a lot of interesting aspects to that content. I will say the rewards for leveling up Enchanting are actually very solid. You know, the ability damage, the intel, that's very, very good. I like that. However, there's not a lot to do in this skill in terms of how you actually level it. I think that the Enchanting minigame is nice. It's a good, stopgap before they end up working on an Enchanting Island. And I do think there's some amount of potential there. Maybe you could do something in the far future with an island that's mystical and magical, and you're going around and you're fighting mobs, and maybe those mobs drop ingredients that you can use to get more enchanting XP or whatever. I just don't think it's a very good skill currently. I think it's definitely weaker than farming. I think that if you enjoy this skill, that's fine. I actually enjoy my time doing the enchanting minigame every once in a while, but those times are few and far between because there's generally not much to do with this skill at all. I'm going to come out and say it. I think Alchemy is the worst skill in this game. I think that Alchemy also has a problem where it's kind of kneecapped by the current game itself, to where it's going to be very, very hard for the admins to expand upon the skill. We'll see what they do with Year of the Witch. I'm potentially excited for it, but I'll be real. Alchemy is just buying a bunch of stuff on the auction house or mining a bunch of gold if you're on Iron Man, and then maxing the skill. There's not a lot of interesting content there. There's not much interesting stuff to do. I hope they're able to do a good job with Year of the Witch. However, even if they do a good job with Year of the Witch, I'm still going to be upset because I don't want the only good part of alchemy to be on a 12-year skyblock timer. I think if they do a good job with Year of the Witch, I'm really going to campaign for it to be fully added to the game and integrated as part of the Alchemy skill. But currently, there's nothing interesting about this skill. I feel like it's going to be very hard to make making potions interesting in Skyblock because we already run around with God Pots, we already run around with all the mix-ins and everything else. There's just not really a place for this in the game. I would make the argument that there's less of a place for alchemy currently than there is for carpentry, and carpentry has basically nothing going on related to it. I think there's the tiniest bit of potential here, but not a lot. This might get me a little bit of hate, but I actually think Taming is a B tier skill. I think even though there is no direct content with Taming, pretty much whatsoever, I think if you're going to do a passive skill in Skyblock, a skill that just levels up over time by doing other activities, I think Taming is done pretty well. The idea of getting more pet XP is a very nice reward. I like the concepts quite a bit. I think it's also something that could be theoretically expanded upon in the future if we ever get another pet update that maybe allows you to have more direct interaction with your pets as a whole. I think it's not bad. Obviously, it doesn't really have any direct content, but what puts it above both Enchanting and Alchemy for me is even if I'm not interacting with it, it's still a positive that benefits my account, and what puts it above Farming for me is that there's no negatives in terms of the gameplay. It's not being harmed by me having to sit there for 500 hours and load up something on my second monitor. It's passive, it's not obviously the most enjoyable thing in the world, and there isn't much content at all associated with it, but what's there is fine. Dungeoneering, in my view, is a low S tier skill. I think the only problems I have with Dungeoneering are not really Dungeoneering itself, but the way Catacombs scales. I don't really love the gear scaling in dungeons. I feel like it gets out of hand way too quickly. It makes it so if you're Cata 36, for example, you want to do M7, tough luck, buddy, getting the M5 mines, you're not doing that until Cata 45. Aside from that, though, the leveling experience for Dungeoneering is very, very good. I like the idea of the classes. I like the idea of the unlocks. I think everything is set up fairly well. The gameplay is very enjoyable. It's good combat content. The thing that prevents me from putting it in S+, is that we haven't seen too many additions to Dungeoneering over the past few years, and because of the issues in current dungeons as a whole, I really do get worried about where the potential for this lines up in a couple years' time. A few years back, I probably would have put this in S+. I thought that there was a lot more potential for new dungeons to be added to Skyblock. Recently, not so much. I think the way the community is right now, with how much cheating and how much ratting goes on, and how a lot of that does come from dungeons, I don't feel as much of the potential, but it's still a very good skill. Leveling it is very fun. You're doing a lot of unique content that you don't really see elsewhere in the game, so for that, I'm going to be giving it an S. Carpentry, for me, is a low D tier skill. It is not very good. There is not much content associated with it, and the things you do to level it up are not the most enjoyable in the world either. I think there is some potential, though, for a carpentry-related expansion or island where you're making furniture or you're putting together wood and getting special results out of it. I don't know. There's ideas there that I think are at least plausible and possible and potentially interesting. Obviously, in its current form, it's not a very interesting or good skill at all. There is very, very little to do. Not much of it is fun at all. It kind of does distract from other skills a little bit in a way. I feel like something like smithing could exist in the game in its current form a lot more than carpentry. You could do smithing stuff with like the forge, or you could do it with like gemstone fusion or other concepts that already are there, reforged stones, etc. There's just not much associated with carpentry at all. I'm going to make a video on smithing eventually being a concept skill, but for now we're talking about carpentry here. It's not very good. There's at least some possibility of an expansion there. I do think it's less bad, or rather worse than Enchanting, but less bad than Alchemy as a whole. Maybe that'll change in the future. I kinda doubt it. These next two are kind of one and the same. It is Runecrafting and Social. Both of those are going to be going in the D tier, because neither of them really have any sort of content to do related to them much at all. Runecrafting, I think, is a little better than Social, and frankly, I'd probably put it above Carpentry. I think that there are some positives with it. You're unlocking the runes. It's nothing negative, which is kind of why I gave Taming a B tier, but the main difference between it and Taming is that Taming is actually useful. You want to get XP for your pets. It's a very useful skill to level up because it allows you to get through the leveling process faster, which makes you more money or makes you stronger. Runecrafting doesn't have those benefits. There's not really any gameplay associated with it unless you call like going to dusk gameplay. Very, very weak skill. Some amount of potential there. I don't think there's a lot. It's not like this is RuneScape where you can do a lot with like runes as a whole. This was very much integrated, I feel like, because they wanted to do a cosmetic system of runes so they could sell them, theoretically, whatever. That's fine, but it doesn't lead to a great skill. Social is way worse because leveling it is awful. The content you do to level it is awful. It's just sitting on other people's islands or getting people to come to your island. And also, there's basically no potential there. I had an idea, maybe you could do something with the Abaphone contacts, like leveling up your Abaphone, or not getting better ones, but getting new contacts. Maybe that could give you social XP. There's other stuff you could do there, maybe meeting certain NPCs for the first time, your garden visitors, etc. That could be a way better way of giving you social XP so players could level this up. Right now, it's just going to be one of those skills that for most players, they are never going to max out, and I kind of feel like most of the skills should have some logical pathway to maxing them. Even if this one is a quote-unquote cosmetic skill, you still see it. It should still have something associated with it, so hopefully the admins do something to it in the future. Next up, we have hunting, and while I do have a lot of praise for the hunting systems in Skyblock, they do need to continue to be expanded upon for me to put this much higher. I'm going to put it very high B tier. I could even hear an argument for a low A. I'm going to keep it in high B for now. There just isn't a ton of gameplay associated with this. It's just killing monsters. It's putting them in the black holes. While that is very enjoyable, it's just not a lot in terms of sheer quantity. I imagine that in future islands and things like that, we're going to get a lot more to do with hunting. The fusion concepts will likely be expanded upon. I think this will very easily enter A tier, maybe even S tier if they do a lot with it. For now, it's a high B. It's a good skill. I think it's pretty fun to level. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I think something like having it go up to like level 40, for example, would have been reasonable with the first island of Galatea. Maybe not 50, maybe not 60, but there was definitely more than enough content to get you to level 40. Level 25 just feels a little low. I'm just way past that at this point. I think it was good, though. Overall, there's a lot to do there. Tons of little animals to hunt. A very fun, very cute little skill. Not the craziest in terms of what you're actually doing. Not super heavy in terms of intensity. I would love to see something else associated with this. Maybe a boss that you could hunt repeatedly. Maybe integrate it with Slayer somehow, more so than it is currently. Because like right now, you can get like a couple of the shards from a few of the bosses. You could probably do more than that, but for now, high B tier, good skill, but nothing crazy. Alrighty, and that's the tier list. We have combat in S+, we have mining and dungeoneering in S, foraging and fishing in A, taming as well as hunting in B, farming in C, enchanting, runecrafting, carpentry, and social in D, as well as alchemy, the worst skill in Skyblock. I would love to hear what you guys think. I will have this linked down below, this tier list, so you can make it for yourself. Feel free to send it in my Discord, discord.gg/Derailious. Just know that I am right, and if you disagree, you are wrong. I don't really have any follow-ups to that. Make sure to like and subscribe once again. Look to the future, fellas. I'll see you then.